So, has anyone been watching Andor on Disney Plus, the Star Wars show about Cassian Andor, who's part of the rebellion and is kind of one of these key figures that we see throughout the course of the series and everything? My mom and I have been watching it. We got the first season done a little while ago. We're working on the second season. We're enjoying it. Although I believe the second season is supposed to be the final season because Andor ties into Rogue One, which is essentially a one-off Star Wars movie where at the end of it, all the good guys die because they're responsible for stealing the plans for the Death Star from one of the Empire's bases, and then that plan that they get is then what is given to Princess Leia. That is the plans for the Death Star that she has at the beginning of A New Hope, which was the first Star Wars movie to come out, but it's actually the fourth one in the series for the main movies. And then that's the plans that they then use to then destroy the Death Star in A New Hope. So, just for reference there, I know that possibly means very little to some of the One Piece fan base, but there has to be a crossover there somewhere. I mean, Oda himself has thrown lightsabers into this story. We haven't seen any Force ghosts in One Piece yet, but we've seen lightsabers. And I mean, to a degree, you could compare like Eam and the Gorosei to like Emperor Palpatine type of a thing in that regard. There's some things that could be compared between the One Piece world government and the Empire. Could make some comparisons there. Okay, time to finish up about Raizo, and we actually just kind of saw him in some of the cover pages, so we'll be getting to that near the end of this video. So this one will be picking up kind of right where we left off with the Scabbards and all of their allies and everything, the Straw Hats and the Heart Pirates and the Kid Pirates and the Minks and all of that stuff and the Samurai, all on their way to Onigashima for the Battle of Onigashima. This video is pretty much going to cover everything from all the way through the Battle of Onigashima for Raizo, and then up through after it, ending out Wano, and then what we have currently seen in Yamato's cover story, which Raizo literally just had his appearance in. So I timed that well for the Raizo one. Not so much for the Kiku one, but for the Raizo one at the very least. Okay, so when I left them at the end of the last episode, at the end of the last episode, they were on their way to Onigashima, and they were, they were on their way to Onigashima after having met up with all of their allied forces that were coming, that were meeting at the the other port, at the Habu port instead of at the Tokage port where they thought they were supposed to be, but they weren't. But they were over at this other one. And everything, but thankfully it all worked out, and Kinemon's version of 3D chess worked out. Kinemon is so lucky in that regard. So on their way to Onigashima, this is of course also when Kanjuro has kidnapped Momonosuke, unfortunately, and taken him to there, and that'll be part of their goal, is to of course rescue Momonosuke, but he kind of directs them to just focus on trying to take down Kaido. And that is what the Scabbards plan. Their plan is for them to infiltrate Onigashima along with the Minks and the other samurai to make their way in and be able to get ready to basically ambush Kaido. And then essentially ends up working well. Law is basically like, no, we're going to use Luffy and Kid as a distraction because they will draw attention to themselves and away from us. And that's literally what ends up happening. Which is a great plan, because by this point in time, after having dealt with them both on Punk Hazard and then on Green Bit and Dressrosa, Law is kind of like, no, listen to me, Kinemon. That's not going to work. Just let Luffy and Kid be the distraction. And Zoro, just let them be the distraction, because the other ones can kind of follow a plan. Those three can't follow a plan to save their life. Which is kind of true. So that's what happens there once they get to Onigashima. But first, on the way there, they run into some of the Beast Pirate ships. Jinbei shows up. He's able to take those out. And then, they get there, they get past the Torii Gate, and then they get to Onigashima, where once they are there, they then burn all of the boats, because it's like, well, if this fails, we're not going back, we're going to die here. Because that's a fun thing to think about. And then they get all, Kinemon uses his, devil fruit powers, his cloth jutsu, to be able to give all of them clothes that look like the Beast Pirates' clothes, so they're able to then hide among the Beast Pirates as they work their way around. Raizo, where did Raizo end up for all of this? I think Raizo was just in the submarine. I believe he ended up in some of the garb, but I don't think so, because I think he was just part of the group that was going around back to then meet up at basically the back door to Kaido's castle, the back entrance, as Kinemon and Denjiro would lead the forces around, and then of course the Minks would end up on top so they could take advantage of the moonlight. To be fair, their plan for Onigashima, the plan that Kinemon and the others came up with for the attack on Onigashima, technically was designed rather well. It's just a few, potholes came up along the way, and thankfully those potholes ended up being kind of helpful in some cases for that type of thing. But overall, it's not a bad plan. And they get around to the back, and of course, once they're there, Nekomamushi and Izo arrives, Marco drops them off, so they're all just happy to see them and everything. And Raizo's just kind of there during this part. He's not particularly doing anything important. He's not using his clone jutsu or his stealth abilities or anything like that as a ninja to get them to where they need to go. They're just Law's submarine just takes them around, and then he room and shambles them up onto up onto the beach side so they can get up and head in and fight. So that's basically what happens there. Once they are there, that is where they are then kind of ambushed. Not really ambushed, because it's like, well, he kind of knows they're coming. So we have that Kanjuro has arrived, and he has several of the Beast Pirates with him. He also has several of his ink constructs are there as well. So that way he is able to then try to fight against them. This, of course, leads into his fight with Kiku, where they believe she actually takes him out, but unfortunately she doesn't, and that comes back to bite them later. But they deal with that group rather quickly. Raizo is, again, this is not an hour after they found out that Kanjuro has been a traitor to them for the past 20-something years. So it's not even they've had time for this wound to heal a bit, for this wound to scar or whatever. It is an hour, if that, since this information has been made clear to them. And they're like, okay. So Raizo does weep over their friend, over their former comrade, because it is this whole thing of there's all of these memories that they have, and unfortunately Kanjuro is going to be there. It's not like they can eternal sunshine of a spotless mind and remove him. Although it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if Kanjuro had been turned into a toy by Sugar. That would be a very nice way of getting rid of him from everybody's memory now that Orochi is taken care of and Wano is back under their control. Just go find Sugar. It's go to the world government. Okay, the annoying little girl from Dressrosa that can turn people into toys? Yeah, we want her to come with us. We have a guy we would like her to touch, but he's dead. I know, we really want to forget about him that much. That would be a good way to just no more Kanjuro from your memory. It's just he's gone. We don't have to worry about him anymore. That would be nice. Not what's gonna happen, because Kanjuro's just dead. Later on, by the end of all this, Kanjuro's dead. But they do weep over their friend, and then they head into the castle, and they make their way to the live stage where Kaido is giving his big speech. about the new Onigashima project, about moving it and dropping it on the flower capital, and all of that stuff, and just upping the manufacturing of weapons so he can make his pirate paradise world and everything like that with like Big Mom's help and all of that stuff. To be fair, in all honesty, I think they could have pulled it off. Kaido and Big Mom and their crews working together. I think they would have been able to pull it off and given the world government a run for their money. Even with the Gorosei and the Gods Knights getting involved, I think they could have done a lot of damage in finding the One Piece and all of that stuff. And so they make all, Kaido's making that announcement. I don't think the Scabbards hear any of this announcement. And then Kaido just up and Orochi, which, again, cathartic overall, but the Scabbards didn't get to help with that this time. They will later, but not yet. And so they burst onto the live stage, and they charge at Kaido, and Kaido's partially drunk right now. He just had a fun time of getting to decapitate someone he does not like, because I don't think Kaido ever really liked Orochi. He was just more like, he's a convenient pawn to use, and he's an insect that I can squash at any given time because he has no defense whatsoever. And all the Scabbards just charge at Kaido. Raizo doesn't have a sword, or at least, well, he might have a sword. I think he has a sword just because I think all the Scabbards have had a sword at some point in time. But sword is not what Raizo is like trained in. He is, of course, trained in ninjutsu, so there's a difference there. But he does manage to land attacks on Kaido because they all jump Kaido, and he falls over the balcony, and they are all just like stabbing their swords or their weapons. I think Nekomamushi is just Catling gun unloading into Kaido as many times as he can while they are falling, and they fall off the stage or off the balcony, through the floor, and into the ground, where they then get off a couple more small attacks. Right, Kaido just kind of, I didn't like that. And he stands up and he recognizes them because it matches like the way that Odin's, like their Ryu for a moment, matched the way that he remembered Odin's being 20 years ago. And he's like, okay, and like he's, he enraged that they attacked him enough that he's bleeding. Particularly the scar that he got from Odin is bleeding and is in pain. This makes him just like, okay, screw it. Goes into dragon form and flies up through the floor. They all like stab into him with their weapons or grab onto him as they are lifted up out of the floor and onto the top of the skull dome, where the minks are now all waiting for them, and the guardians and the musketeers and stuff are all waiting for them. And then, of course, Jack, along with some of his forces and one of the numbers, are up there on top of the roof as well, getting ready to fight. And it basically goes down to the minks versus Jack's forces, just kind of as a bit of like revenge type of a thing after what happened with, Zoe so many months ago, the months ago, and everything with what happened there. And Raizo and the other Scabbards just kind of like step back to allow this to happen because like Raizo still feels himself as the cause as to what happened at Zoe, even though they now know that it was Kanjuro that sent the Beast Pirates to Zoe to begin with, to look for Raizo. But Raizo still blames himself for like all of the minks that got hurt, for the fact that Inarashi lost a leg and Nekomamushi lost an arm. Two of his oldest friends were just so badly injured by this. So many of the minks suffered and, died probably. And he still blames himself for that. So they're just like, yeah, no, we'll let you guys deal with them. You have fun with that. Eventually, Jack's forces are taken out enough, and the minks unfortunately take enough damage. They all end up back down inside of Kaido's mansion later on. And Arashi and Nekomamushi go Sulong, and they then go and fight against Jack, where they are able to just cause a ton of damage to him, and then he gets sent back down, and then it's all of the Scabbards, including Izo. I include Izo as a Scabbard. I believe he should be qualified as a Scabbard. An honorary Scabbard. And same thing with Shinobu. And they head down or they all the Scabbards are now ready to fight against Kaido. And they go into the fight against Kaido. And we kind of cut back and forth between what's going on the roof at that point in time and what's going on down below. So we cut back and forth a bit. Kaido at one point releases his Boro breath, and Raizo is able to use his Maki Maki Jutsu, his scroll fruit, to activate, and he just like absorbs all of the Boro breath into the scroll, which he then uses to then throw, and it like wraps around Kaido and then releases the Boro breath back onto Kaido, which is quite impressive, and Raizo definitely got points for that. So he's able to unleash that attack back on Kaido, which does cause some damage to Kaido. Again, it's the whole thing with Kaido where it's just like one person can only do so much damage to Kaido that so many different people have to fight him over the course of this night. We start it with the Scabbards, and then it goes into Luffy and the rest of the Worst Generation that are there, causing damage to him, and also having to fight Big Mom at the same time. Then you get into Luffy fighting him on his own, and then you get into Yamato fighting against him for a while, and then you have, Luffy shows back up again and fights him for a while, and Luffy gets knocked down again, fights him some more, after he awakens, and then is finally able to defeat Kaido because Kaido just refuses to move when the giant fist of Luffy is coming right at him. And so it's like the Scabbards help with like chipping away at some of Kaido's health. Unfortunately, they don't do a whole lot overall, but they do help with chipping away at it. And even though Kaido has high endurance and high healing ability, I think some of the scars that they land on him, because they do manage to, several of the ones who use swords, they use their Odin style Togen Totsu, I believe, in order to land some pretty damaging hits on him. Raizo, of course, he used the scrolls to release that attack back on him. I think he releases another attack back on Kaido at one point in time. During that time frame, also this is during the time frame when Kaido unleashes the scythe, his wind scythe, and that chops off Kiku's arm, which they then pause and cauterize so she can keep fighting, and Kaido is just impressed with this, which is why he turns back into his human form, or his not human form, his hybrid form, to fight against them. And this does not end well because it ends with all of the Scabbards beaten, bloody, and unconscious, lying on the ground by the time Luffy, Zoro, Kid, Law, and Killer get up to the roof. And of course, Luffy is just angered by this, which is fair. And I mean, the other, Zoro and Law are also angered by this because, Zoro was friends with the Scabbards, and Law is angered by this as well because he does care about the Scabbards. Kid and Killer really have no connection to these guys, although Raizo did technically help them at Udon, so I guess there's a bit of something there, but not a lot. Kid's not good at showing concern for other people that are not his crew for the majority of the time. Most of the time he's not good at that. And what ends up happening is, of course, Luffy has Law, room shambles them out of the way and gets them out of the battlefield, so they down into one of the just various treasure rooms or mysterious empty rooms that they have in the castle. And while they are there, their injuries end up getting treated by a mysterious person who is Hiyori. She's there, she goes through and she tends all of their wounds, gives them a lot of basic first aid, cleans and wraps up their wounds, and then vanishes by the time they wake up. And they're like, okay, well, what happened? Why are we bandaged up? Who did this? Why are we not on the roof and dead? They're like, well, someone must have helped us. And it's just well, I thought it was someone I recognized, because some of them are probably going in and out of consciousness while Hiyori is doing this. And the only one who really probably would have been able to piece it together is Denjiro. And he doesn't say that it was Hiyori because he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to spoil to the reader that, oh, Hiyori is here on the island and everything for her to, then have to deal with Orochi later. But you get the idea. From there, the Scabbards are preparing to go and continue the fight and try to find their way to Momonosuke. At this point in time, the door bursts open, and standing there in front of them is a seemingly healthy and living Odin, who looks the same as the day that he died. And they're just like, Lord Odin, and he claims that Toki sent him there by his power, but it's Raizo and Ashura Doji that realize that this is not Odin. Ashura Doji probably figures it out because I'm sure Denjiro and the others have also had times where they just imagined Odin showing back up again and all of that stuff. But Ashura is one of the ones who figures it out, and Raizo is one of the ones who figures out that this is not him, that this is not their true Lord Odin. And Raizo is one that remains. It was just only Toki could only send people into the future from the past, and that Odin died 20 years ago. And the fake Odin just comes up with some BS reason. It was no, that's not what happened. I survived, and Toki managed to send me into the future. It's yeah, no, we know you did. And even if you weren't dead, you would be very, very badly injured from boiling for an hour in hot oil and boiling oil. So they go through all of that, and Ashura jumps up and attacks the fake Odin, revealing that he's one of Kanjuro's drawings. This, of course, leads into him revealing that he has dynamite, and that the real Kanjuro is on his way to go and try to get Momonosuke to kill him. Ashura then jumps on the fake Odin, and they fall off of the balcony, and the dynamite goes off. And he is then, the fake Odin is gone, but this is where, of course, Ashura dies. And the rest of the Scabbards are just okay, well, as much as we really want to mourn our friend that we just lost, we don't have time for this. So it is kind of in war movies where you have D-Day and all these other, the Allies landing in Normandy and everything else like that. In regards to that stuff, where it's your comrades are dying all around you, and you're just well, we have to keep going forward, or else this is all for naught. So they'll head off. They run into Jack. Inarashi stays behind to deal with Jack. The rest of them head off again. And this is when they then run into Orochi and Fukurokuju, which is where now it's kind of time for Raizo to step up. Not that he hasn't been stepping up at all, but, steps up here specifically. All of these Scabbards jump forward and slice off various heads of Orochi in his Yamato no Orochi form. And, he gets back up again and slithers off with his tail between his legs. And only one head remaining, so that's the last one they have to deal with. And then Raizo and Fukurokuju end up having a ninja battle. And this we cut back and forth to over the course of the other battles that we see like this. We cut back and forth to during, Luffy's battle with Luffy's battle with Kaido on the roof, and with Kid and Law fighting against Big Mom, and a bunch of the other battles throughout the course of time. We keep cutting back and forth as Raizo and Fukurokuju essentially try to out ninja each other, and which one is the better ninja. And Raizo ultimately proves himself the better ninja. They're going through, and they physically clash a little bit with Fukurokuju fighting with his ears, and Raizo fighting with his belt stuff that he has to fight with, and clone jutsu and different things like that. And then eventually it comes down to technically a battle of attrition, as they are both using, I think it's the paralysis jutsu that they end up using, where they are both literally neither can move because the other one is pinning them with their paralysis jutsu, which I don't understand, but okay. He's not physically holding on to you, so I don't know why you can't move. But they are also, this is where they are being surrounded by the fire that Orochi had set. And of course, this is also having to deal with what's going on with the Kanzenbo, I believe, is also taking place during part of this time frame. And they are just literally out ninjaing each other and out devotioning to their lords with each other. Because Fukurokuju, while he is kind of loyal to Orochi, he's also just a snake in the grass himself. And Raizo is exceedingly loyal to the Kozuki family. He was loyal to Odin, and now that has been shifted down to Momonosuke. And Raizo, Fukurokuju is like begging him to try to like, release me and we can both escape this fire. And Raizo is literally like, nope. I watched my lord boil for an hour. This is nothing compared to the pain that I have gone through. And then eventually Fukurokuju just, they're both basically being like cooked because they're both on fire. And I'm like, I would have abandoned this a long time ago. I don't have the resolve that Raizo has. But eventually Raizo wins because Fukurokuju just, he doesn't die outright, but he's very much close to death's door. And then Raizo is able to like release the parasite thing or the paralysis thing so he can move. And he then kind of like panics as he like gets all the fire out on him. He's like, hot. And from there, this is where we kind of get into his other big moment. His first big moment where they kind of showed where Oda demonstrated what Raizo's scrolls could do is gathering up the Boro breath from Kaido and then releasing it back onto Kaido. This is another time where we're going to see him use his scroll abilities, which is very nice. And what ends up happening is Raizo is kind of like, he's not down for the count, but he's injured enough. And eventually what happens is, there's fire everywhere, and Jinbei shows up. And Raizo realizes that, okay, well, you're a fishman. Now, he also, I believe, saw Jinbei being able to use, like, his fishman karate and, stuff like that against the Beast Pirate ship, so he saw that he was able to, like, manipulate water. Also, since I don't know how much Kawamatsu has in regards to connection to, like, being a fishman, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if we ever saw Kawamatsu display any types of like fishman karate or, jujutsu type of a thing. I don't think we ever saw him do that, but those might have just been techniques that he combined with like his, sword fighting ability and everything else like that. Jinbei finds Raizo and is just like, okay, well, I got to get you out of here. And Raizo's like, wait. I have a way of taking care of the fire. And it's like, Jinbei's like, okay. And Raizo's like, go stand over there. Jinbei, okay. And Raizo opens up one of his scrolls, and this is the scroll that way back when he was on Zou and he saw like, the elephant rain. That was the seawater. He gathered up a ton of that seawater into a scroll, and this is where we see him get to use it, where we get like that little flashback and we see it. And he opens the scroll and it just like releases all of this water that Jinbei then is able to grab and manipulate enough that he's able to send it down all of these different hallways that are around them, that then spreads throughout Onigashima and is putting out the fires all over Onigashima. And big points to Raizo there. I think he got like the MVP of like the chapter when that came out for what he does here, which is awesome. And like he releases all of that, and and this is also kind of a possible detriment to him too, because he's a devil fruit user and he could get caught up in the water, and that's one of his weaknesses. But he's like, I've been through enough right now. This is needed. We have to put this fire out as much as possible, which of course ends up helping because it does put out a ton of the fire, or the majority of the fire. And, of course, helps with, calming all of that down. And then after that, I believe Raizo and Jinbei, who made a great team, by the way. I would like to see them team up again at some point in time, like if there's like the big final battle. And like the Scabbards and Momonosuke roll up to wherever the final battle is because of like, Luffy's Beaver card or whatever. They show up there and they're all ready to fight. And like Raizo ends up like teaming up with Jinbei to use their water combo attack. With like Raizo going, I got more scrolls, Jinbei. Jinbei just happy for that, so he knows what to do. It's just like, okay, and we're gonna douse Crocodile in water, so he's not gonna be very useful right now, and we're gonna go find someone else and douse him in water, so he's not a threat anymore for a little while. So there's that type of thing. That would be fun. But they eventually make their way back down to the live stage, I would assume, and we kind of don't see Raizo again until we have it where Nekomamushi is announcing that Luffy managed to defeat Kaido, and that Momonosuke managed to land the island safely, so it did not land in Onigashima safely, so it did not land on the flower capital. And like everybody is just so happy and exuberant and cheering and everything else like that. Then we get into where Momonosuke and the Scabbards fully make their return to the flower capital, to Wano. And this, of course, is, Momonosuke flies over the flower capital in his dragon form now that he's, all grown up and everything. Well, physically all grown up. Mentally, he's still 8 years old. Physically 28. And he's flying over the flower capital, getting everybody's attention, and they all, are starting to panic because giant dragon. It's just like, wait a second, it's pink, not blue. Did Kaido just eat a ton of peaches and now he's pink? That doesn't sound good. Did Kaido get so drunk he's pink now? Why? I don't know. I don't know how drunk would Kaido have to get to change color. I don't think that would work very well. They're like, oh my god, it's a dragon! Why is it pink? Who cares? It's a dragon! And, this is where, they all, all the Scabbards start walking in and they're all wearing, like, the robes, the cloaks that I'm pretty sure Kinemon just kind of, like, conjured for them to all wear as they make their entrance back to the flower capital. And there's, Hiyori is there, and they're recognizing her as, oh my god, it's Komurasaki, she's alive. But it's like, it's all the rest of the Scabbards coming in, and then Momonosuke makes his grand entrance. And all the citizens of Wano are just like, it's Momonosuke, it's the Scabbards. And they're just like so amazed by this, and they're just so happy and relieved. And it's just like, Kaido is gone, the Beast Pirates have been defeated, Orochi is dead, all the stuff. Kaido got dropped into a volcano. It's like, we're good, Wano is free now. And so it's like they're all just, exuberant about this. And, all the Scabbards are also just like, it's this crushing weight of like, they can let this kind of relief off their shoulders now. They have achieved what Odin had requested of them for, several months ago for the ones who went to the future, and for 20 years ago for the ones who waited through that time frame. And it's like this weight is taken off of their shoulders, and they are just, their tears are tears of sadness in the fact that, like, they lost Ashura Doji, and eventually, and they'll find out that they lost Izo as well. And, so many other of the samurai definitely died during this attack, during this battle, and all of that. But it's also tears of relief because they have finally been able to bring Odin's vision of freeing Wano from Orochi and from Kaido to fruition. And Momonosuke is now the shogun of Wano and all of that stuff. So we have that there. And from there, this speech gets broadcasted all over Wano and everything else like that. So it's, nice that way. We cut to about a week later, and of course, Raizo is, of course, enjoying, the festival that we see. I don't think we see Raizo there when Luffy and Zoro first wake up, but I'm assuming he's somewhere in the castle doing something. But then we do see him we see him at the second fire festival that they have, once Luffy and Zoro are awake. And they're just like, yay, raising toast to the Ninja Pirate Mink Samurai Alliance. And, and the Wano citizens and everything else like that. We see, Raizo there with like Kiku and Toko, I believe. So we're seeing all of them. And then we get to when Ryukoku shows up, when Admiral Ryukoku shows up and starts causing problems and starts attacking them and trying to, he shows up because he's trying to capture Luffy. Because Luffy's the new Yonko, and if you can cut, then you get the idea. And he goes through, and like Raizo is one of the ones that show up and are fighting against Aramaki, Ryukoku, with with their devil fruit powers and everything. And he's trying to use the scroll to release like fire attacks on him, and like Aramaki just reforms because of his Mori Mori no Mi. And, they are able to put up a bit of a fight because, like, Momonosuke shows up and he's still working on getting a hold of his Boro breath and everything. And, like, Shinobu is there helping. Rashi and Nekomamushi and Denjiro are all there, I believe, helping. Kiku is not. And then Yamato does show up to try to help. And then Momonosuke orders, Yamato not to help because they have to try to prove that they can do this without Yamato there. Otherwise, Yamato would feel like they were too weak for them to be able to, for Yamato to be able to leave them while he went off with the Straw Hats, because that's at this point in time what Yamato's intention still is. From there, we have it that, Ryukogu manages to stab both Raizo and Shinobu with his vines and suck out, a lot of their liquids and nutrients and everything, which just leaves them both shriveled husks. And thankfully, Shank shows up and he's able to, scare the F out of Ryukogu, and then he leaves. And then we get back to the castle, and of course, Raizo and Shinobu are being treated by Chopper and Miyagi and Tristan for their injuries from, just basically being extremely dehydrated. When Shinobu wakes up, she has her, feminine for her figure back from when she was younger. And Raizo, we're all like, oh, is Raizo gonna be handsome now? And it's like, nope. Raizo just looks normal. But okay, Raizo, listen to me. You are now a star throughout Wano. You are a national hero throughout Wano. There are plays that are being done where you guys are the stars and where you guys have merchandise throughout Wano. I know this is something that's a little more hyped up in the anime, but I think that is what would happen anyway. Where they have like all the merchandise for the Scabbards and everything, and the posters and all of that stuff. And I just, Raizo, I think you're going to be able to get a girlfriend. On top of that, you're going to be a daimyo, which we'll get to in a second. So then it comes time for the Straw Hats to leave, and of course the Straw Hats say goodbye to everybody except for Momonosuke and Kinemon, which of course they then have to make them run after the Straw Hats to get goodbyes from the Straw Hats, which is fun. And from there, we see, like the newspaper printing the picture with Raizo and all of the Scabbards and Momonosuke, and everything with Momonosuke as the new Shogun of Wano. And we have like that kind of picture as we're finishing out the arc. Into the cover page story that we are getting right now, or at the time that this is coming out, Yamato's Golden Inari Shrine Tour and pilgrimage. And we just recently saw Raizo. He is currently, he was made the daimyo of the Udon region, which is of course where the prison was. I kind of thought maybe that they would have like Kawamatsu be the daimyo of the prison, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. But not in this case. They make Raizo the one in charge there. And given the fact that all of the problems had been happening with Who's Who within his region, Raizo, you need to step up your game there a bit, buddy. I love you, but you got to step up your game. But we saw him show up right at the end after Yamato was able to like take out Who's Who, which did not take long. And then Raizo shows up and with food for Yamato and Tama and everything, and then we see him with Tama and Speed as Yamato and Ulti and Page One are heading off toward presumably the Hakumai region, because that's the next one going around Wano that they would get to. And that's the last time that we have seen Raizo at the moment. I don't know what else is going to happen with Raizo. As I said, it would be interesting to see Raizo show back up if they do the big final arc or whatever, or the big final battle, and have a bunch of their allies show up, have a bunch of the ones from Wano show up and help them. Momonosuke rolls up as his dragon form, and all the Scabbards jump off, and Yamato jump off, and they have Ulti and Page One there. It's some of Yamato's retainers, and they all jump down, and they're like, okay, ready to fight, type of a thing. That would be fun. We'll see what happens. I have no idea. So far, the daimyos of the new regions haven't had the best track records because, Denjiro was doing his job. He was trying to help the kids not attack Yamato and making them all sit down and learn, just because Yamato has the horns, blah, 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 that doesn't mean he's bad. Ashura Doji had people, or not Ashura Doji, may he rest in peace. Inarashi had people just vanishing, and he's just sitting there eating with Yamato. And then Raizo, it was happening in his own backyard where whose base was. Not that it's all that hard to miss a giant base that's shaped like a saber-toothed tiger, a saber-toothed cat, but still. So hopefully, the other two daimyo for the Hakumai and the Ringo regions will hopefully be better and keeping things a bit better. Get some bureaucracy, bureaucrat crap taken care of so they can get the regions running better. So that's what I have here for Raizo, since this should be the last one for him. And then I've got there's the three Ashura Doji videos, because again, split him up into stuff, and then it should be Kawamatsu after that, and then Shinobu. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!